Coming up on this episode of the Ready Test Go podcast.
There's too much stuff for us to react to. There's too much stuff for us to have an opinion on because we just can't digest it fast enough. And so what we're doing is we're overwhelming the teams, we're overwhelming leadership, and we are overwhelming our customers. Imagine every time you go to your bank and say, how does the navigation work today? Where's the online bill pay this week? To rediscover how to use our products and services on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, it's going to exhaust people. Who wants to be the person inside a company that says, hold on a second, I know we have the capability to ship 10 times faster than we do today, but I'm saying we shouldn't do that. We should actually validate what we're shipping with real customers before actually putting anything out to scale. There has to be a reckoning here because the old ways of working, accelerated with AI, are going to lead to a bunch of garbage, a big pile of AI slop garbage that no one's going to want to deal with.
When you think of the life of the party, you might imagine someone with a loud personality or lots of interesting stories to share. But sometimes you can inspire without saying a word. Jeff Gothelf describes his father as the reason for the party. And one of the ways he would capture attention is by playing piano. Jeff followed suit, and he's been playing ever since.
My father plays. And so there's always been a piano in the house. He's been playing since he was a little boy. And my father plays well, and he is kind of the life of the party. Still, to this day, he's almost 80. His friends invite him over because he plays the songs that his friends love to hear. And so he sits down, he plays, everybody sings along. And that was really inspiring. As a kid, to see that, my mother threw a lot of parties. He was the reason for the party. And so that was inspirational. So my brother and I took piano lessons, classical piano lessons growing up. And then I carried that on into college and beyond, played in some touring bands over the years. And for me, it's always been my favorite place to be is on stage playing piano with people that I like playing music with. Always kind of striving to figure out how to do more of that.
From classical music in his youth to jazz, funk, and southern rock as an adult, Jeff has found that there's always a new tune to play. And being able to share that with a crowd is like a modern-day magic trick.
In college, I discovered improvisation because classical music doesn't really allow for improvisation. So I discovered improvisation, ended up playing in a jazz funk band that jammed a little bit, and then ultimately ended up doing a bunch of touring with a band that was like a southern rock jam band, much like the Allman Brothers Band. 2 electric guitars, lots of meandering vocals and guitar licks, and then some keyboard solos here and there. When all of that ended, it's been whenever it's kind of worked out in between work and new places to live and kids and jobs and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, still super important to me.
Following a tune is how he came to find himself in an international Grateful Dead cover band. Was he a Deadhead? No. Is he a Deadhead now? Getting there, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a more enthusiastic fan base.
I got recruited to join a band called the Euro Dead Orchestra. I knew one of the founding members of that band. He was a guy I'd played music with a couple of times before, and he was putting together this international, like a super group of people to get together and play Grateful Dead songs, initially in Europe, perhaps beyond that as well. I've never really been a huge Grateful Dead fan. I'm not a fan, but I'm certainly not a Deadhead. Right? I know some of the songs, I've heard the things. So it was interesting to be invited into this world of these guys are hardcore Deadheads. They love this, they play this is their main jam. So that's been really interesting to be inducted into that world. The crowds come and they love it. The people who come to these shows, they love these songs. They love this band. Like no one's shown up and been like, this is my first Grateful Dead show. Like these are people in their 40s and 50s or whatever. And they're like, I've been listening to this for 30 years. Give me more, right? So like you're just making them so happy. It's hard to beat.
Bringing together a band with roots all over Europe, well, that's not exactly an easy feat. In fact, the first time they all played together in person was at Soundcheck before their first show. But a simple mantra that inspired the Dead back in the day keeps him grounded today.
We've got folks in this band who are coming from 4 different countries: Germany, Italy, Spain, the UK, etc. We gigged recently, about 6 weeks ago, in Berlin, and we had never played together the first night of the show. The first time that band ever played a note with everybody on stage at the same time was at sound check. I was arriving at the gig in Berlin, and the bass player, who I know is the guy who recruited me for this, I said to him, listen, okay, look, it's the first time we've all played together. I don't know how this is going to go. What happens if it starts to go sideways? Like, who do we follow? Like, I don't know these other guys. I know you. I know the drummer a little bit. One of the drummers, there were two. And he said, let me tell you a story. He goes, there was a famous roadie for the Grateful Dead, and the press at one point asked him, because the Grateful Dead were this chaotic organization, they said, hey, who's in charge over there? Like, who's making decisions? Who's in charge of this Grateful Dead operation? And the roadie, this famous roadie said, the situation's in charge, man. Right? And that was the answer I got for, like, if things go sideways, who's in charge? They're like, situation's in charge. And so we went with it, you know what? And then a couple of times, the situation took over, and we went with it, and we landed it. In some ways, for me, it's the most important thing in the world, in many ways. My favorite place to be is on stage, performing music. My second favorite place to be is consuming music. I go to concerts, I go to shows. There's always music on when I'm working. There's music on in the morning when I'm having coffee. There's music in the car. That's rubbed off on my kids. They love music, and they love the music that I love, which is nice. So we have a lot to talk about. It's a thing for all seasons, right? So if you're feeling down, there's music for that. And if you're feeling up, there's music for that. And if you need to transition from feeling down to feeling up, there's music for that, and vice versa, right? What a sad world it would be without music. I guess that's the way I see it.
This is Ready Test Go, brought to you by Applause, the podcast on software quality and digital experiences. I'm David Carty. Today's guest is Cosmic Keysmith and Product Leadership Advisor, Jeff Gothelf. Jeff helps organizations turn technical capability into customer value through better decision-making and evidence-driven methods. He is the co-author of several books, including the influential Lean UX, and co-founder of Sense and Respond Learning. For years, shipping faster has been treated as a key sign of a healthy product organization. But AI makes it effortless to generate prototypes, and that forces us to confront a new challenge. Velocity can actually mask a lack of true progress. In other words, are teams actually solving real user problems, or are they simply running a high-speed feature factory that rewards output over outcome? These sound like great questions for Jeff. Let's learn how to successfully shift from delivery-driven execution to evidence-driven learning. Here he is. For years, shipping faster has been treated as a sign of a healthy product organization. AI now makes it even easier to generate ideas, prototypes, and software quickly. But that obviously changes things quite a bit, right? So how should leaders be thinking about the idea that speed is always a virtue?
Speed is a virtue, and AI is making that even clearer to these organizations. But what is currently, I think, being missed by a lot of organizations is that the speed that they're applying AI to is the speed of production. And while I understand the attraction to that, even the addiction to that, the nature of these tools now is such that we are exponentially increasing our capabilities to produce things and the quantity of things that we are producing, the quantity of output. So whether it's deliverables or documents or code or interfaces or marketing campaigns, et cetera, or whatever it is that we can produce anything very, very quickly and at relatively low cost. The problem is that we are not able to consume all of that. So if you think about it from an organizational point of view, right, there's too much stuff for us to react to. Right? There's too much stuff for us to prioritize. There's too much stuff for us to have an opinion on because we just can't digest it fast enough. Right? And then on top of that, if we start shipping all this stuff to production, I guarantee you that our customers are not in any position to consume all of this new stuff at a pace that is able to take advantage of this level of production. And so what we're doing is we're overwhelming the teams, we're overwhelming leadership, and we are overwhelming our customers, potentially. So there's a real risk here without a clear focus, without a clear sense of what I should prioritize first. There's a real risk of taking the production mentality that's dominated even software based organizations, pretty much every organization now for the last couple of decades, and making it exponentially worse without actually looking at that particular phenomenon.
Yeah, let's stay on that topic of risk. I think maybe the operative word here is convincing, right? These outputs are convincing. They're intended to achieve a certain level of acceptance criteria with the user or the end user, right? So you can create pretty convincing prototypes, interfaces, even working software through AI loops without going through the same sort of rigor that previously software was subject to, right? The same discovery, design, and engineering principles. So, with all of that in mind, how is AI changing the risk profile for product teams?
Look, you're spot on in this, right? Everything that we produce looks great, right? It looks
Yep.
done. Ship it. It's beautiful, right? It's not done. It looks like it, but it's just based on a series of assumptions that you prompted and that the AI put back. It's still a bunch of untested assumptions. They look nicer, they look more compelling, but they're not necessarily the right assumptions. And so the risk profile here is that we do even less validation of those hypotheses, right? It's already been tough enough to get folks to think about assumptions, hypotheses, and experiments. I mean, Lean Startup has been in the market for 15 years. At this point, Lean UX has been in there for 12 years, right? Lots and lots and lots of people have been talking about these ideas, and now, why should I test it? Just ship it and let's see if anybody uses it. But as I said a second ago, right? If we just ship everything, just because somebody doesn't use something doesn't mean that it was bad, or if they do use it, that it was good. It just means it's the thing that they focused on, they paid attention to right now. And so the risk here is that we take even more unvalidated ideas and put them out into production. And I think a lot of folks are saying, well, let's see what people do with it. Ship it. All right, let's see what people do with it. But imagine every time you go to your bank and it's like, oh, how does the navigation work today? Oh, I got to prompt the nav today. All right, where's the online bill pay this week? And it's an example, and it's a relatively pedantic one, but this is what we're asking people to do, right? To rediscover how to use our products and services on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, and it's going to exhaust people. So I think there's tremendous risk here.
And this seems like an obvious statement, but you're a big proponent of learning, which is maybe in short supply these days. Where do you see product teams often confusing speed with progress? And maybe what are some of the early signs that a team isn't putting enough of a priority on learning anything useful?
I mean, look, it's really difficult, right? We took a manufacturing attitude and we applied it to modern business, and then we applied it to software-based businesses, which is essentially, like I said, every business out there today. And so the incentives have always for the last 100 plus years, have been make more stuff at lower cost and make it faster, and that's how we define value. And even when continuous software became the norm, that stopped making sense, right? This idea of like, well, if I make more features, I'm creating more value. No, you're just making more code, which you now have to support forever for the rest of your life, right? And now we're in a situation where we can take those same approaches and exponentially increase the output. And again, we're finding ourselves in a place where the incentives, the promotions, the celebrations are still based on, well, wow, look at how many more features the team produced last week. Who wants to be the person inside a company that says, hold on a second, I know we have the capability to ship 10 times faster than we do today, but I'm saying we shouldn't do that. Right? We should actually validate what we're shipping with real customers before actually putting anything out to scale. Right? It's a risky move, and culturally, right now, there still are very, very few organizations that are making it safe to stand up in front of the organization and say, "Look, I'm going to slow the train down." Right? I'm not slowing down the value to market. I'm actually going to reduce the risk of putting garbage out there that's going to devalue the brand and devalue the product experience and the user experience. right? But that's a really tough. You have to be either a very high-ranking individual or somebody with a lot of capital to spend inside an organization, because it's so addictive and it's so easy. Oh, I just prompted it into existence and there it is and it looks good. So ship it, see what happens.
Realistically, if there's exponential growth in code production, there's exponential opportunity for risk and for alienating your users as well, right? So it's funny how sometimes we think of one side of the coin but not the other.
And look, and I've been talking about this for years, but it's always the last thing that people deal with inside an organization is incentives. The all hands meeting, what are we celebrating? Are we celebrating Jeff's awesome prototype that he whipped up in 15 minutes on his train commute into the office today? Right? Or are we celebrating the fact that Jeff's awesome prototype taught us that we shouldn't build the whole production version of Jeff's awesome prototype? Right? I think the former is celebrated, promoted, rewarded, incentivized a lot more than the latter. Right? And so look, ultimately people might know better, but they're going to optimize for what gets them paid and promoted.
That's a great point. So, sticking on that theme, why do organizations continue to reward that output even when they don't clearly have a measurable impact on improving the customer experience? You know, features shipped, roadmaps completed, and velocity increased. Those might be easier to track, they might be easier to manage or show off, but those things only go so far, right?
Yeah. Uh, we measure output because it's binary.
Mm.
That's it. It's a yes or a no. It's a one or a zero. Did you build the thing? Did you make the app? Did you ship the feature? And if the answer is yes, you did a great job. If the answer is no, then you didn't do your job. And because it's easy to measure, it's easy to manage. It's easy to say, hey, did you ship the new scheduling feature to the mobile app? Yes, we did. Okay. How many people have used the scheduling feature since we shipped it? 27% of the user population. Terrific. What was our goal? We needed 80% to use it in the first month, or it wasn't viable, right? That's a fundamentally different conversation, right? And that's a conversation that could have been headed off weeks earlier with some planning, testing, experimenting, learning, validation, iteration, and then some kind of a change in the plan, right? Before we went live in production with it. And that's more, it's a range, right? The outcome, what we're looking there is outcomes over output, right? What's the behavior change that we're seeking? That's the outcome versus the output. The output is binary, right? Did you make the thing? I made the thing. Cool or not cool, right? Did you get 80% of the user population to use it in the first month? I got 27%. Is that a fail? Should I fire you? Should I give you a raise? Should I be happy? Like,
Yeah.
it's a more difficult conversation. And again, most organizations are not built around that. They're built on what was your very tangible contribution to the program that we're working on.
Right, right. What are some of the warning signs that a team is becoming a feature factory in the way that we are describing rather than a learning organization?
I mean, look, the signs are always clear, right? So, what's on the roadmap? Number one, right? Feature, 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 feature. Is there any sign of success criteria? Are we talking about the customer? Let's start there. If we're not, it's a feature factory. Are we talking about customer behaviors after we ship these things? If we're not, it's a feature factory. If the conversation in your organization generally lives at two very distant levels, right? So if it lives at the revenue level and the feature level, you're a feature factory, right? The most important stuff happens in between those things, right? It's the user behavior, the customer behavior in between, right? We're going to build this thing, and then it's like, money? No, it's not money. It's people look for the thing and people find the thing and people try the thing and they get value from it and they come back and they use it again on a regular basis. They pay us for it. They tell a friend, right? All of these various things. If you're not having those conversations, or if you're having those conversations, but they're being sort of discarded ultimately over time when it comes to assessing the success of an effort, it's a feature factory, 100%.
Right, and those outcomes often involve a longer feedback loop, as you're talking about. So
Yeah.
it can be that can have a little bit of a clash or a push and pull with the velocity that teams want to release at.
But,
Um,
but, but look, but let me just jump on that for a second, because I think it's
yep.
important to note this too. Like I have been sort of talking about how AI is exponentially increasing our ability to produce output, and that can be a negative thing if an organization isn't set up to filter out the good from the bad, right? The flip side of the story is that AI can actually help us learn faster as well. So yes, the cycle time is longer, right? It takes more than the time it takes me to prompt something into existence, but it's still significantly faster than it's ever been before. The ability to create artifacts that we can put in front of real people, collect that data, synthesize that data, and come back with an iteration. I mean, that used to take weeks of
Yeah.
time, right? I think with continuous software, we could reduce it to days, maybe even hours, depending on the scope of the organization. And I think that with AI and a steady and regular access to our users and customers, this is something that we can get down to like a couple day cycle, right? A couple times a week certainly is realistic, and that's a reasonable time frame for this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance, right? There are opportunities for efficiencies and opportunities for inefficiencies.
Yeah.
Um, if we could get back to the feature factory example, once a team is operating that way, what's the downstream effect on quality? How does that affect the quality of the product decisions? What tends to get skipped or simplified along the way?
Well, I mean, again, I just don't see like if we're truly exponentially increasing the quantity of stuff that we're putting out there, I don't see how we can successfully do real QA on it to the point where like this is a high quality thing that lives up to our brand promise and our value and everything that we put out into the market. I think what we end up with is the very traditional, very basic definition of done, which is works as designed, right? Works as designed, ship it, right? Because I've got a floor to ceiling list of Jira tickets I need to work my way through. Particularly if you've got AI as part of your product and service, not just in the process of making your product, but you're actually producing an AI product, right? The definition of done can't be static anymore, right? We're not
Mhm.
building vending machines, right? A vending machine, right, you put money in, you push the button, and a can of soda comes out. And the vending machine works as designed. And it should do that 100% of the time, right? Money, button, soda, right? All of a sudden, right, we're building non-deterministic systems, probabilistic systems, right? So what I put into the machine and what I get out of the machine is always going to be radically different. Not radically, it's going to be different than what you put into the machine and what you get out of the machine as well. And so done all of a sudden isn't this very works as designed static thing. It's a range of acceptable options, right? And if we're not defining that up front, then we'll get a couple of right answers from the AI service and move on. And then the next, when we actually put it into production, we're going to find that it's a disaster. It's saying dumb stuff or whatever it is, right? And so I think the impact here is significant, both on the production, but also on the tools themselves, particularly if they're using AI. We're not thinking through all this stuff quite yet.
It's all about constantly working to achieve quality outcomes.
Mhm.
And with that in mind, what makes building the right thing so difficult inside large organizations? We've talked about this a little bit, but teams have smart people. They have strong engineering talent, usually very empathetic people. They have great access to customer data. So, where does that breakdown usually happen?
There's a level of arrogance, I think, when your organization gets to a certain size or has been at a certain size for a certain amount of time, where there's a strong feeling that you know what the market needs and you're going to give the market what it needs. And I think that there is an expectation, albeit I think this is not a good thing. I think there's an expectation on leadership to come across as if they know exactly what the market needs and what should be built. And so therefore they believe they should behave this way. And so they dictate solutions to their teams, and their teams go forth and they build the stuff and then they ship it. And guess what? It was a set of untested assumptions, right? It was one person's very strong opinion that was very strongly held. I think it's much rarer to find a leadership team particularly in an organization that's been successful, particularly for a long period of time, who says, "Look, okay, there's new technology here. There's new interaction models. There's new ways for us to deliver our product or service to market. Here are my thoughts, right? If you collect evidence that contradicts my strongly held belief, I'm willing to let that strongly held belief go, right? I think those conversations are few and far between. I think partially it's because there's still this expectation that the boss knows everything. And whether that's explicit or implicit, I think that a lot of leaders assume that that's what they need to do. I need to tell people what to do. Really? Like, I'm really good at designing interfaces, and she's really good at writing code, and they're a fantastic product manager, right? Give us a direction. Tell us the business problem you're trying to solve. Let's set up some outcomes that tell us that we've actually solved the business, and then get out of our way, please. Right? Let us figure out the best way to get there. And again, I'm going to come back to this point again. We can learn and course correct, right? That ship, sense, and respond loop. Where that loop used to take weeks or months or days, we can build that loop into certainly a week's worth of time, days, and even hours sometimes. And so the course correction happens as part of the product development process. But again, that's a difficult conversation when someone's like, build me that button, make it red, ship it by Friday, because I know best.
That reminds me of a great nugget of wisdom I heard recently, which is that the clearest sign of intelligence is being able to have your mind changed when you're
Absolutely.
presented with new data, right? So it can be hard, I think, for some of these leaders to realize when they're brushing up against hubris or techno chauvinism, to use a term that we've talked about on this podcast before. But if we're trying to learn from this, right, how should we think about customer behavior when we're evaluating whether a product decision was successful? How can teams get better at measuring real changes in behavior, whether we're talking about loops like you're mentioning, or other methods, rather than relying on those internal assumptions and signals?
I think, particularly if you work in an organization where these conversations are not happening, I think that one of the easiest things that you can do is when you are having a conversation about building something, somebody needs to raise their hand in that room and say, "Hey, once we build this, not if we build this, right? When we build this." So that we're not challenging anything, we're not stressing anybody out, we're not being insubordinate, right? When we build this thing, what do we expect our customers to be doing differently with it? I think that's a perfectly fair question, and
Yep.
I guarantee you that 90% of the room hasn't thought about it. Oh, that's a really good question, Jeff. Right? Great. Yeah. Well, I guess I expect them to use it. Okay, cool. What does use it mean? Right? Because features aren't usually like a button, right? It's usually a workflow or some kind of interaction, right? What does use it mean? Okay, great. Who are they? And how many of them do we need to tell us that we built something of value? And I think just asking those questions, you're not tying them as success criteria to the project. You're just bringing those up. And I think to kind of starting that way should be a relatively safe way to start to bring up these ideas and get folks thinking about those ideas, so that once you build the thing and ship it, and you've got a little bit of usage data, some analytics, you can be like, hey guys, you remember like 3 months ago when we talked about shipping this thing, we said we needed at least 80% of the user population to download it and then start using it within the first month. Well, it turns out that like 12% have downloaded it. Of those 12%, only half have even tried it. Right? We've got to go back and figure this out. So we're building the muscles and the vocabulary to get people to outcomes. I think that's a nice way to get them there without having to stand up in front of that train and try to slow it down. But that, to me, that's the easiest question. What will people be doing differently when we ship this thing?
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. And asking thoughtful questions is one example that comes to mind. But what are some other ways that outcome-driven teams actually approach their day-to-day work differently? And maybe what do those teams, just as importantly, stop doing in their day-to-day work?
Look, first and foremost, is they start with a problem to solve, right? Not a solution to implement. I think if you're starting with a solution to implement, you're already going to have to reverse engineer the conversation and the work. So first and foremost, we start with a problem to solve. Right? What's the business problem we need to solve? We're seeing a 75% drop off in step 2 of the checkout process, whatever it is. Right? People have to ask the AI 10 times before they get a satisfactory answer. Right? And then they never come back and use it again. Right? What's the business problem that we're trying to solve? To me, that's a great place to start. Once you can identify the problem, and to be super clear, it's a problem statement, which means there are no solutions in that conversation. Not how will we solve the problem? What is the problem? And then if we solve the problem, What will people be doing differently? You can even say, if you're an optimist like me, you can say, when we solve the problem, what will people be doing differently? It sounds so simple, right? But it's such a powerful way to start a project and move away from this idea of we got to make stuff, we got to make stuff, we got to make stuff, right? It basically says, look, our customers are having this issue. That customer issue is causing this business problem. Okay, great. So if we solve that, the customers will behave differently in this way, which will give us these business results. Okay, great. Now, what are the various ways that we might go about achieving this change in customer behavior? Right. And to me, that's where the real fun part of the work comes in, right? That's the innovation, that's the creativity, that's the iteration, because there's an infinite number of ways to solve every problem. And so let's figure out which one is the best way. And again, the best way is not from the person who shouts the loudest, and it's not from the person who has the highest job title. It's the one that shifts customer behavior, right? So there's an objective way to make decisions and prioritization choices, right? This idea moves the users in the right direction. This idea does not, or does it less, right? The discussion we were having a second ago, inevitably, some of those conversations are going to contradict the project leaders or the executive stakeholders' very strong opinions on the project. And how they react to that will determine whether or not we actually take a customer-centric approach to solving this problem and building a product, or if we take an executive feature-based approach to doing it.
Yeah, let's tease that out a little bit more. We're building dynamic products. We need to think of our customer workflows as dynamic, but there are a lot of stakeholders in the room, right? So, what does a healthy relationship look like between product, design, engineering, and QA? What does that all look like when the goal is learning and not just delivery? And how does that have a downstream impact on the user experience?
The short answer here, and we'll open it up a bit, is transparency. And transparency comes from cross-functional collaboration, number one, right? So we've talked for years about breaking down these silos and building cross-functional teams. I hope that that's becoming and has become the norm in most organizations. But the idea being is that we talk about these problems together as a team. It's not something that the product manager disappears and comes back and says, "Oh, I have defined the problem statement." Right? You might come with a draft and then get feedback from everybody, right? And then we work together to identify the success criteria, right? And then as we start to build these learning loops into the process, every single time that there's some feedback, especially feedback with some kind of consequence, right? We share that back with the team immediately. Right. Hey, we ran this experiment today. We talked to 3 customers. We showed them the prototype. This is what we learned. Okay. What does that mean for our backlog? What does that mean for the work that we were planning on doing for the next couple of weeks? What does that mean for the deployment date that we had in mind, right? What does that mean for the marketing campaign? Let's talk about that and let's move things forward. Let's adjust things as we go along, right? There has to be that capacity for course correction. There has to be that slack in the workflow that allows us to make those decisions on the fly, because that data is going to be coming in off the fly. And the impact here is a team that is, forgive me for using an ancient term, agile, right? Lowercase a, right?
Yep.
Not the religion, right? Not capital A, right? But a team that displays agility, a team that has an opinion about where to go, a team that is learning along the way, and that is adjusting course. And the beneficiary here is always going to be the customer, because the feedback, the evidence that we're collecting is what's driving the course correction. And the customer is the source of that feedback. So in theory, right, if customers are saying this works for us and this doesn't work for us, then we do more of the first thing, then in theory the customers become more successful, right? That's the whole point. The whole point. Otherwise, executive stakeholders are right. Just do what they say, right? If they can knock it out of the park on the first try, amazing. Good luck.
Yeah, if only it was that simple, right?
Right.
So to get the other side of the coin, let's empower people too, right? This is amazing technology, so we are going to see some non-coders start to build some prototypes,
Sure.
maybe some legitimate-looking digital experiences. What sorts of disciplines or guardrails can organizations put into place to help make sure those are being built in a helpful way that ultimately promotes better business outcomes?
I think that's a great question. And I don't think that question gets asked enough at the moment, right? So we need governance in place. What tools can we use What features of those tools can we use? What are the constraints around? Like, what can we put into these tools? What should we not put into these tools? Are there safe sandboxes that we can engage with these new AI tools in a way that doesn't compromise anything in production, that doesn't compromise personally identifiable information or customer confidentiality? Are there test data sets that we can use? I don't think organizations are having those conversations that much yet, right? How do we create a safe space for people to experiment with these tools, to understand their capabilities, to run them against actual real data that would give us actual real feedback before deploying it out into production? And I think the more that we have that defined, the freer people will feel, the safer people will feel in using the tools that they've been provided with to do their work. It was a phenomenon a bunch of years back called shadow IT,
Mhm.
where people would bring in their own devices because the laptops and the mobile phones they got from work were garbage, and so they're like, I can just be more productive with my home laptop and my iPhone or whatever. And I think what we're seeing today is same phenomenon with AI. I think we're seeing shadow AI. It's like, I'm just going to take this test data and drop it into Claude code over the weekend and see what happens. Right? That's super risky. Right? That's super risky for that particular organization, and I don't think that that's what organizations ultimately want. And so I think building in that governance and being explicit about that, it's liberating. It's not just safety for the organization, but it's liberating for the practitioners to know what they can do and where they can do it.
Yeah, it is a wild new frontier. And to your point about the risk, even if you're working with very secure data, you're not exposing anything, there's still a risk bringing that back into the company system, with all of the risk of prompt injection and things like that, right? So
100%.
the risk is orders of magnitude, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Um, Looking ahead, perhaps through a very foggy looking glass, what will separate organizations that use AI to build better products
Mhm.
from those that use it to build the wrong things faster?
I think there will be a reckoning, and I think the organizations that will come out ahead are the ones that will redesign the work. This is a foundationally kind of a generational shift in the way that we interact with machines, just in sort of in general speaking, right, in a very generic way. I think the organizations that redesign the work, the ways of working, the team structure, the organizational structure, the permission workflow, the governance that we talked about, the expectations that they have of these tools. Those are the organizations that are going to ultimately thrive in this new world. And I think that the organizations, and we're seeing it now. I think the primary use case is the second, which is we're just sort of bolting on AI into our current ways of working. And so yeah, it's like putting like a tank of nitrous in your car, right? Oh my God, it goes so much faster, right? But you're destroying the engine along the way. I mean, look, if speed is the only criteria, yeah, you've done well there, right? But I think the organizations that can distribute this in a way that makes sense for the next 5, 10 years of work at least, right? And I feel like that's a big leap. Those are the ones that are going to succeed. Like there has to be a reckoning here, because the old ways of working accelerated with AI are going to lead to a bunch of garbage, like a big pile of AI slop garbage that no one's going to want to deal with. And I think the organizations that will say, okay, look, you can build pretty good looking prototypes with this tool already, right? Let's redesign how we're working this, the team structure, who's responsible for what, how we move things forward. It's going to be painful. I think it's going to be painful for folks who like to be in a box, people who identify with their job title and identify with the thing they've been doing for the last 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. But we'll get there. And I think the companies that do this and kind of retrain their organizations are going to be infinitely more successful.
Jeff, lightning round questions. First, what is the most important characteristic of a high quality application?
The most important characteristic of a high quality application is that it solves the problem that I have in the most efficient way possible.
What should software development organizations be doing more of?
Software development organizations should be talking to customers more.
Hmm. And what should they be doing less of?
They should be making fewer assumptions about the value of their ideas.
And finally, what is something that you are hopeful for?
I'm hopeful that we are now getting a generation of leaders into leadership positions who know everything I just told you and can start to redesign these organizations to truly take advantage of this technology. There's such potential to give such great value to customers today with these tools. I'm hoping that this next generation of leaders can do that.
Yeah, we did spend a lot of time talking about the risk today, but the potential is massive as well. And hopefully we can lean into that as a society and progress things forward. So with that intention in mind, thank you for joining us, Jeff. It's been a great discussion.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a ton of fun.
It was so great to talk with Jeff. You can read more about Jeff's work at senseandrespond.co. Thank you to our producers Joe Stella and Sam Susala, editor Ian Lippincott, and graphic designer Carly Searles. Subscribe to Ready Test Go on your favorite podcast player or watch our video episodes on our website, applause.com. You can also subscribe to the Applause YouTube channel. The handle for that is @applause.com. And if you have feedback or a guest recommendation, what are you waiting for? We'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and reach out to us directly at podcasts@applause.com. Thank you for joining us.